Maya Torres sat at her desk long after everyone else had gone home. The office was dark except for the small lamp on her workspace. She stared at the letter in her hands, reading it for the 10th time that evening. Her visa renewal had been denied. She had 30 days to appeal or leave the country. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold air conditioning that kept running even at night, but from pure fear. After living in the United States for 12 years, everything she had built was about to disappear. Her law practice, her apartment, her friends, her entire life. And going back to the Philippines wasn't just about leaving a life behind. It meant walking straight into danger. Maya's family had been targeted by local officials back home after her father exposed corruption in their province. He was a journalist who refused to stay quiet, and it cost him everything. 2 years ago, armed men came to their house looking for him. Her father barely escaped. Her mother and younger siblings were living in hiding now, moving from relative to relative, never staying anywhere too long. If Maya went back, she would put them at risk all over again, and she would be walking into the same system that wanted to silence her father. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the tears. But they came anyway, hot and angry and scared. She had worked so hard. Law school while working 3 jobs. Passing the bar exam. Building a practice helping other immigrants navigate the same system that was now crushing her. And for what? To lose everything because of a technicality she didn't even understand. The problem was her marriage status. Or rather, what used to be her marriage. Maya's husband, Daniel, had died 2 years ago in a car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light and Daniel never made it home from the grocery store. Maya remembered the police officer at her door. The way his voice got softer when he told her the news. She remembered falling to the floor. She remembered the funeral where she couldn't stop shaking. And then she remembered the months that followed. The gray blur of grief where she could barely get out of bed. During that time, she let things slide. Important things. Legal things. She never updated her visa status to reflect that she was widowed. The lawyer who handled her original application told her it would be fine, that she could update it at her next renewal. But then that lawyer retired and moved to Florida, and Maya, drowning in grief and work, forgot. She just forgot. And now immigration services were saying her entire application was compromised because she hadn't reported the change in her marital status. They wanted proof of her current stability, proof that she wasn't going to become dependent on government services, proof of everything all over again. Maya didn't have that kind of time. She didn't have the money for another lengthy legal battle, and she didn't have the luxury of going back to a country where her family was marked for punishment. She finally gave up trying to work and decided to go home. As she packed her briefcase, her hands were still trembling so badly that she knocked over her coffee cup. It was empty, but it rolled across the desk and fell to the floor with a crash. The sound echoed through the empty office building. Maya bent down to pick up the pieces, and that's when she completely broke. She sat on the floor of her office, surrounded by broken ceramic, and sobbed. Not the quiet, dignified crying she had learned to do at her desk. This was loud and messy and desperate. She cried for Daniel, for her father, for her mother living in fear, for the little sister she hadn't seen in 3 years. She cried for herself and the impossible choice in front of her. She didn't hear the door open. She didn't hear the footsteps. She only noticed someone else was there when a gentle voice said, "Miss Torres, are you okay?" Maya looked up through her tears. Roberto Silva stood in the doorway holding his cleaning cart. He was the night janitor, a quiet man, probably in his 50s, with gray streaking through his dark hair. He wore the same navy blue uniform every night, and he always nodded politely when they passed in the hallway. But they had never really talked. "I'm fine," Maya lied, wiping her face with her sleeve. Just having a bad day." Roberto didn't move. He looked at her with kind eyes that seemed to see right through the lie. "I don't mean to intrude," he said carefully, "but I've worked here 5 years. I've never seen you cry before, not once, so maybe it's more than just a bad day." Something about his voice, the genuine concern in it, made Maya's defenses crumble. Maybe it was because she was too tired to pretend anymore. Maybe it was because he was a stranger, and sometimes strangers are easier to talk to than friends. Or maybe it was because she had been holding everything inside for so long that she would have talked to anyone who asked. "I'm going to be deported," she said, and saying it out loud made it feel even more real. "I have 30 days and I don't know what to do." Roberto stepped into the office, leaving his cart in the hallway. He picked up the broken pieces of the coffee cup carefully and set them on her desk. Then he pulled over the chair from across her desk and sat down, not too close, giving her space. "Tell me what happened," he said simply. And Maya did. She told him everything. About Daniel dying, about forgetting to update her status, about the letter denying her renewal. She told him about her father and the danger waiting back home. She explained how the immigration officer wanted proof of stability, proof of a support system, proof that she wouldn't be alone in this country. Words poured out of her like water from a broken dam. Roberto listened without interrupting. He didn't offer quick solutions or tell her everything would be okay. He just listened, nodding occasionally, his expression serious and focused. When she finally stopped talking, exhausted from getting it all out, Roberto was quiet for a moment. Then he said something she didn't expect. "What would it take for them to approve your renewal?" Maya laughed, but it was bitter. "A miracle. Or a husband. They want proof of marriage for this type of visa renewal. Since I was married before, they're questioning why I didn't report the change. They think I was trying to game the system. Now they want even more proof that I'm stable and established here, but I'm alone. Daniel's gone. I don't have family here. I don't have anyone who can vouch for that kind of stability." "What if you did?" Roberto asked quietly. Maya looked at him confused. "Did what?" "What if you had someone? Someone who could be your husband. For the interview. Just for the paperwork." Maya's heart stopped. She stared at Roberto, trying to understand what he was suggesting. That's fraud. That's illegal. I could go to prison. I could lose my law license. Everything would be even worse." "Would it be worse than going back to a place where your family is being hunted?" Roberto asked, and his voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just asking the question." Maya opened her mouth to argue, to explain all the reasons why this was impossible. But the words died in her throat. Because he was right. Prison in the United States would be safer than freedom in the Philippines right now. And losing her law license didn't matter if she wasn't alive to practice law. "Why would you even suggest that?" she asked instead. "You don't know me. This isn't your problem." Roberto was quiet for a long moment. He looked down at his hands, and Maya noticed they were clean but weathered, the hands of someone who had worked hard for a long time. "8 years ago," he finally said, "I knew someone who needed help with immigration, someone whose life depended on it. I didn't help them the way I should have. I've regretted it ever since. Maybe I can't fix that mistake, but maybe I can help you." There was something in his voice, something heavy with old pain, that told Maya there was more to that story. But she didn't ask. She was too overwhelmed with what he was offering. "You're serious?" she whispered. "You would do that? Pretend to be my husband?" "I'm serious," Roberto said. "If you think it would work, if you think it would save your life, then yes, I would do that." Maya's mind raced. It was insane. It was dangerous. It went against everything she believed in as a lawyer. She had spent her career helping people navigate immigration law the right way, the legal way, and here she was considering fraud. But she was also out of options. And time. "I need to think about it," she said, even though part of her already knew what her answer would be. Roberto nodded and stood up. "You know where to find me," he said. "I'm here every night, 10 to 6. If you decide you want to try this, we'll need to prepare. Learn about each other. Make it convincing." He walked to the door, then paused and turned back. "For what it's worth, Miss Torres, I think you're a good person. I've seen you working late, helping people who can't afford to pay you. I've heard you on the phone, fighting for clients who everyone else gave up on. People like you shouldn't have to suffer because of bad luck and broken systems." Then he was gone, back to his cleaning cart, back to being invisible in the way janitors always were. Maya sat alone in her office for another hour. She looked at the denial letter. She looked at the photo of Daniel on her desk, his smile frozen in a happier time. She thought about her mother's voice on their last phone call, whispering because she was afraid someone might hear. And slowly, impossibly, a plan began to form in her mind. 3 days later, Maya waited at a small diner 6 blocks from her office. It was nearly midnight and the place was almost empty except for a tired waitress and a truck driver at the counter. She had chosen this place specifically because no one from her professional life would ever be here. Roberto arrived exactly on time. He had changed out of his janitor uniform and wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He looked different, more confident somehow without the uniform that made people overlook him. He slid into the booth across from her. "So," he said. "You decided?" "I decided," Maya confirmed, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I need to know something first. Why are you really doing this?" The truth this time. Roberto looked at her for a long moment. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything," he said. "And I know what it's like to have people turn their backs when you need help most. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. It wasn't the whole truth." Maya could tell. There was something he wasn't saying. But maybe that was okay. Maybe everyone was allowed to have their secrets as long as their intentions were good. "Okay," she said. "Then let's do this. Let's create a marriage." Roberto pulled out a small notebook from his pocket. "We'll need to know everything about each other," he said. "Where we met, when we got married, what we do together. They'll ask questions designed to trip us up. We need to have answers ready." Maya watched as he opened the notebook to a blank page, pen ready, and for the first time in weeks she felt something other than despair. It was small and fragile and probably foolish, but it felt like hope. She didn't know then what Roberto was hiding. She didn't know who he really was or what he had lost. She only knew that this stranger, this quiet janitor, was willing to risk something to help her survive, and sometimes that's all you need to take the first step into the unknown. Maya and Roberto met at the same diner every night for the next 2 weeks. They always chose the back booth, the one with the ripped vinyl seat that nobody else wanted. The waitress stopped asking what they wanted and just brought them coffee and pie without a word. On the first night, they started with the basics. Roberto wrote everything down in his notebook with careful, neat handwriting that surprised Maya. Most people typed everything these days, but Roberto's notes were organized and thorough, like someone who was used to keeping important records. "When did we meet?" Roberto asked, his pen ready. Maya thought for a moment. It should be believable. Something simple. Maybe at a community event? A church gathering? "Do you go to church?" Roberto asked. "No," Maya admitted. "Do you?" "Sometimes. But we shouldn't lie about things they can verify." Roberto tapped his pen against the notebook. "What about here?" "This diner. You came in late one night after work, stressed about a case. I was here having coffee. We started talking." Maya smiled despite herself. "That's actually kind of nice." "When would this have been?" "Let's say 9 months ago," Roberto suggested. "Long enough to be serious. Recent enough that we don't need years of fake history." They built their story piece by piece. Coffee at the diner turned into more meetings. Roberto asked Maya about a case she was working on. They discovered they both loved old movies, the black and white ones from the 40s and 50s. Roberto made Maya laugh for the first time since Daniel died. They started dating. Quiet dinners, long walks, conversations about life and loss. "We need to make it real," Roberto said. "Tell me about Daniel. Tell me what your real marriage was like." Maya's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because if we're going to convince people we're married, I need to understand what marriage means to you. How you act when you love someone, what makes you happy, what makes you angry, all of it." So Maya told him. She talked about meeting Daniel in college, about how he made terrible jokes that somehow still made her laugh. She told Roberto about Sunday mornings making pancakes together, about the way Daniel sang off-key in the shower, about the fights they had over stupid things like leaving dishes in the sink. She cried while she talked, and Roberto just listened, pushing the napkin holder closer to her when she needed it. "He sounds like he was a good man," Roberto said quietly when she finished. "He was," Maya whispered. "He really was." Roberto was quiet for a moment, and then he started talking about his own past. He had been married once too, a long time ago. Her name was Isabel. They had met when they were young, too young probably. The marriage lasted 7 years before it fell apart. No drama, no big fight. They just grew into different people who wanted different lives. She remarried and moved to Texas. He stayed in California. They didn't keep in touch. "Do you regret it?" Maya asked. "Getting divorced?" "I regret that I hurt her," Roberto said. "But no, I don't regret that we ended it. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you need to want the same future, and we didn't." There was something about the way he spoke that made Maya curious. He didn't talk like a janitor. Not that janitors couldn't be articulate, but Roberto used words precisely, carefully. He asked questions like a lawyer preparing a case. And his notebook wasn't just random notes. It was organized with dates, details, potential questions they might face. "Roberto," Maya said slowly, What did you do before you were a janitor? He looked up from his notebook, and for just a second, Maya saw something flash in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or caution. Different things, he said. I've had a lot of jobs. But what kind of jobs? The kind that didn't work out, he said, and his tone made it clear the conversation was over. Maya let it go. For now. But she filed the question away in her mind. Over the next few nights, they practiced their story until they could recite it forwards and backwards. Where they went on their first official date, the Italian restaurant on 5th Street, the one with the red checkered tablecloths, what movie they saw afterwards, Casablanca, playing at the old Revival Theater. Who said I love you first? Roberto did 3 months in on a bench overlooking the bay. Why did you fall in love with me? Roberto asked one night, testing her. Because you listened, Maya answered without hesitation. You didn't try to fix everything. You just listened and made me feel less alone. Roberto smiled. That's good. That's real. Why did I fall in love with you? Maya thought about it. Because I didn't see you as invisible. I saw who you really were. Something changed in Roberto's expression when she said that. A sadness, maybe, or recognition. He nodded slowly. Yeah, he said quietly. That works. They rehearsed the hard questions, too. The ones designed to trip up fake couples. What side of the bed does your spouse sleep on? Left side, always, because Maya liked being near the window. What does your spouse eat for breakfast? Roberto drinks black coffee and eats plain toast. He doesn't like anything fancy in the morning. What's your spouse's biggest fear? For Maya, it's losing the people she loves. For Roberto, it's being forgotten, being invisible even to the people who should see him. That last answer came out without thinking, and Maya realized it was probably true. Roberto spent his nights cleaning buildings where people walked past him like he was part of the furniture. Even she had barely noticed him for years until that night in her office. Do people really not see you? She asked. Roberto shrugged. Most people don't see janitors. We're there, but we're not really there. You know what I mean? Maya did know. She had been invisible too in different ways. As an immigrant, as a widow, as a woman in a profession that still didn't always take her seriously. During their second week of preparation, Roberto suggested they take photos together. They needed evidence, he explained. Pictures that showed them as a couple, living a life together. They went to the beach on a Sunday afternoon. Maya felt strange being out in public with Roberto, playing pretend for a camera, but Roberto surprised her again. He was natural in front of the camera, relaxed and smiling. He put his arm around her shoulders and it didn't feel awkward. He made her laugh by doing a bad impression of a seagull. The photos looked real because somehow in those moments it felt almost real. They took more pictures at a farmer's market, at a park, sitting on Maya's couch at home. Roberto came over to her apartment for that shoot, and Maya noticed how he looked around carefully when he entered. He studied everything, the layout, the furniture, the photos on the wall. If they ask me to describe your home, I need to know what to say, he explained. But his attention seemed like more than that. He looked at her bookshelf and named several titles he had read. He commented on a legal journal on her coffee table, asking about an article on asylum law. When Maya mentioned she was struggling with a particular case, Roberto asked questions that showed he understood the complexities of immigration law better than most people. How do you know so much about this? Maya finally asked. Roberto was looking at a photo of Daniel on her bookshelf. He didn't turn around when he answered. I read a lot. The library is free and I have a lot of time. It wasn't really an answer, but again, Maya let it go. She needed Roberto's help too badly to push him away with questions he clearly didn't want to answer. One night, Maya's best friend Carmen showed up at the diner unannounced. Maya had been avoiding Carmen's calls, knowing what her friend would say about the plan. But Carmen was persistent. She slid into the booth next to Maya without asking. So this is the fake husband, Carmen said, looking Roberto up and down. Carmen, Maya said, her voice tight with warning. It's okay, Roberto said calmly. She's worried about you. That's what friends do. Carmen leaned forward, her eyes hard. You could both go to prison for this. You know that, right? Immigration fraud is serious. They'll investigate you, Roberto. They'll dig into your background. Are you ready for that? Something flickered across Roberto's face again. That same look Maya had seen before, but his voice stayed steady. I'm ready. Why are you doing this? Carmen demanded. Nobody helps a stranger like this without a reason. What do you want from Maya? Carmen, Maya was horrified, but Roberto held up a hand. "She's right to ask," he said. "If I were her, I'd ask the same thing." He looked directly at Carmen. "I don't want anything from Maya. I'm helping because it's the right thing to do. Because I can. That's all." Carmen studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to Maya. "This is insane. You could lose everything." "I'm going to lose everything anyway if I get deported," Maya said quietly. "At least this way I have a chance." Carmen's expression softened. She reached over and squeezed Maya's hand. "Okay, if you're really doing this, then do it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. And Maya, be careful. With the immigration people and with him." She glanced at Roberto. "No offense." "None taken," Roberto said. After Carmen left, Maya and Roberto sat in silence for a while. The diner was nearly empty, just them and the night shift waitress wiping down tables. "She's not wrong, you know," Maya said. "They will investigate you. They'll look at your employment history, your background, everything." "I know," Roberto said. "And that doesn't scare you?" Roberto looked down at his coffee cup, turning it slowly in his hands. "It scares me," he admitted. "But some things are worth being scared about." Maya wanted to ask what he meant, but before she could, Roberto pulled out his notebook again. "Let's go over the timeline one more time. From the beginning." So they did. They practiced until the words felt natural, until their story felt like memory instead of invention. And every night Maya noticed more small things that didn't quite add up. The way Roberto held his coffee cup, like someone used to finer things. The way he corrected himself mid-sentence when he used a word too formal, too educated. The way he seemed to know instinctively what questions an immigration officer would ask and how they would try to trap them. One night Maya couldn't help herself. "Roberto, who are you really?" He looked at her across the table, and for a moment she thought he might actually tell her. But then he just smiled sadly and said, "I'm someone who's trying to help. That's all you need to know." It wasn't all Maya needed to know, but it was all she was going to get. For now, as their interview date got closer, Roberto suggested one more practice session, but this time he wanted to do it differently. He wanted Maya to interview him aggressively, the way a suspicious immigration officer would. He wanted her to try to catch him in a lie. They met in Maya's office after hours. Roberto sat across from her desk and Maya pretended to be the officer. "How many pillows does your wife use?" she asked. "3. One between her knees, one under her head, one she hugs." "What did you have for dinner last night?" "Chicken tacos from the place on Mission Street. We were too tired to cook." "What's your wife's greatest weakness?" Roberto paused at that one. Then he said quietly, "She carries the weight of the world on her shoulders. She thinks she has to save everyone. It's going to break her if she's not careful." Maya stopped pretending. That answer was too real, too true. Roberto had seen something in her that even she didn't always admit to herself. "How did you know that?" she whispered. "Because I watch," Roberto said. "I see how late you stay, how many clients you squeeze in, how you never turn anyone away even when you can't afford to help them for free. I see you, Maya. Maybe I'm the only one who really does." There was something in his voice that made Maya's heart beat faster. This was supposed to be pretend, but it didn't feel pretend anymore. It felt like something else entirely. Something confusing and complicated and real. Before she could figure out what to say, Roberto stood up. "We're ready," he said, his voice back to business. "The interview is in 3 days. We know the story. We'll be fine." But as Maya watched him leave, pulling on the jacket that hid his janitor's uniform underneath, she wondered if anything about this would be fine. She wondered who Roberto really was and what would happen when the truth finally came out. Because the truth always came out eventually. Maya was a lawyer. She knew that better than anyone. The morning of the interview, Maya woke up at 5 in the morning even though her alarm wasn't set until 6. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw herself sitting across from an immigration officer who knew she was lying. She saw handcuffs. She saw a plane taking her away from everything she had built. She got up and made coffee with shaking hands. Her apartment felt too quiet, too empty. She thought about calling Carmen, but what would she say? That she was terrified? Carmen already knew that. That she wanted to back out? It was too late for that. She had made her choice and now she had to live with it. Roberto was supposed to meet her at the Federal Building at 9:30. The interview was at 10. Maya arrived 20 minutes early, wearing her best suit, the navy blue one she saved for court appearances. She stood outside the building watching people walk in and out. Security guards, lawyers in expensive suits, ordinary people with worried faces clutching folders of documents. She checked her phone for the 10th time. No message from Roberto. He was probably on his way. But a small, terrible voice in the back of her mind whispered, "What if he doesn't come? What if he changed his mind? What if this was all some kind of cruel joke?" Then she saw him. Roberto walked down the street toward her, and Maya almost didn't recognize him. He wasn't wearing his janitor's uniform. Instead, he had on dark gray slacks and a white button-down shirt with a tie. His hair was neatly combed. He looked professional, dignified, like a completely different person. "You look good," Maya said when he reached her. "So do you," Roberto replied. He smiled, but Maya could see the tension in his jaw. He was nervous too. Maybe that was good. If he seemed too relaxed, it might look suspicious. They walked into the building together. Security took forever, going through their bags, checking IDs, making them walk through metal detectors twice. Maya's hands were sweating so badly she had to wipe them on her skirt. Roberto stayed close to her, his presence steady and calm, even though she knew he must be as scared as she was. The waiting room on the 3rd floor was painted a depressing beige color. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Other couples sat in plastic chairs, holding hands, whispering to each other. Maya wondered how many of them were real and how many were pretending, just like her and Roberto. They sat down. Roberto reached over and took her hand. His palm was warm and dry, and Maya was grateful for it. They didn't talk. There was nothing left to say. They had practiced everything. They knew their story. Now they just had to sell it. Maya Torres? A woman with a clipboard appeared in the doorway. She was young, maybe 30, with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She didn't smile. "Please follow me." Maya and Roberto stood up. Maya's legs felt weak, but she forced herself to walk steadily. They followed the woman down a long hallway, past closed doors where other people's fates were being decided. Finally, she opened a door to a small office. "Officer Chen will be with you in a moment," the woman said, and left. The office was tiny and windowless. 2 chairs sat across from a metal desk covered in stacks of folders. A computer monitor sat dark on one side. There were no pictures on the wall, no personal items anywhere. It was the kind of room designed to make you nervous, and it was working. Maya and Roberto sat down. Roberto was looking around the room carefully, his eyes taking in every detail. Maya noticed his jaw was clenched tight. "You okay?" she whispered. "Yeah," he said, but he didn't look okay. He looked worried in a way she hadn't seen before. The door opened and a man walked in. He was in his 40s, Asian, wearing a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He carried a thick folder that Maya recognized as her file. He didn't look mean, but he didn't look friendly either. He looked tired, like someone who had done this interview 1,000 times and didn't expect to be surprised by anything. "Good morning," he said, sitting down behind the desk. "I'm Officer Chen. Thank you for coming in today." He opened the folder and scanned the first page. "Maya Torres and Roberto Silva. Married 9 months ago." "Yes, sir," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. Officer Chen looked up at them. His eyes were sharp, evaluating. "Let's start with something simple. How did you two meet?" Maya had practiced this answer so many times it came out smoothly. "We met at a diner, late at night. I was working on a difficult case and needed to clear my head. Roberto was there having coffee. We started talking." "Which diner?" Chen asked. "Joe's on Market Street," Roberto said without hesitation. Chen wrote something down. "And when was this exactly?" "About 18 months ago," Maya said. "Last April," Chen looked at Roberto. "What was Maya working on that night?" "What case?" Maya's heart jumped. They hadn't prepared for that specific detail. But Roberto didn't miss a beat. "She didn't tell me the details that night," he said. "But she was frustrated because a family was going to be separated. A mother and her children. Maya was trying to find a legal way to keep them together. It was perfect because it was the kind of thing Maya actually did." Chen nodded and wrote more notes. The questions kept coming. What did they do on their first date? When did Roberto propose? Where did they get married? Maya and Roberto answered each question calmly, their practice story flowing naturally. They had done this so many times in that diner booth that it felt almost real. But then Chen's questions got harder. Maya, what side of the bed does Roberto sleep on? The right side, she answered. Roberto, does Maya snore? Sometimes when she's really tired. Maya, what does Roberto do on Sunday mornings? He reads the newspaper. The actual paper version, not online. And he drinks his coffee black while I make breakfast. Roberto, what's Maya's biggest pet peeve? When people are late. She hates waiting for people. Chen kept writing, his face giving nothing away. Maya couldn't tell if they were convincing him or if he saw right through them. Let's talk about your wedding, Chen said, leaning back in his chair. It was a small ceremony, according to your application. Yes, Maya said. Just a few friends. At the courthouse. No family? Maya's throat tightened. This was the painful truth, not a lie. My family is in the Philippines. They couldn't travel. And Roberto's family, we didn't invite them. Chen looked at Roberto. Why not? Roberto's expression stayed calm. I don't have much family left. My parents are gone. My sister and I aren't close. We wanted to keep it simple. Convenient, Chen said, and there was something in his tone that made Maya's stomach drop. A marriage with no witnesses except friends. No family to verify the relationship. It wasn't about convenience, Maya said, and real emotion leaked into her voice because this part hurt. I wanted my mother there. I wanted my father to walk me down the aisle, but they can't leave the Philippines safely. So yes, it was small, but it was real. Chen studied her face for a long moment. Then he turned to his computer and started typing. The silence stretched out, broken only by the clicking of keys. Maya's heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Finally, Chen stopped typing and turned back to them. Roberto, I need to ask you about your employment history. Roberto went very still. Maya saw his hands grip the armrests of his chair. You currently work as a janitor at the office building where Maya works, correct? Chen continued. Yes, Roberto said. And before that, I worked as a janitor at a school. How long have you been a janitor? 5 years. Chen flipped through some papers in the folder. And before that? There's a gap in your employment history. What were you doing between 2015 and 2020? Roberto's face had gone pale. Maya saw a muscle twitch in his jaw. I had some personal issues, he said carefully. I was unemployed for a while. Personal issues, Chen repeated, writing it down. Can you be more specific? I'd rather not, Roberto said, and Maya heard something in his voice she had never heard before. Fear. Chen looked up sharply. Mr. Silva, this is an immigration interview. I need to establish that this marriage is legitimate. That means I need to know who you are, so I'm going to ask you again. What were you doing between 2015 and 2020? The room felt like it was shrinking. Maya looked at Roberto and saw him struggling with something, some decision he didn't want to make. She wanted to help him but didn't know how. I had a different career, Roberto finally said, his voice quiet. It didn't work out. I lost my job and it took me a long time to recover. That's all? What career? Chen pressed. Does it matter? Roberto asked, and now there was an edge to his voice. I'm a janitor now. I work hard. I pay my taxes. I'm married to Maya. That's what this interview should be about. Chen's expression hardened. I'll decide what this interview is about, Mr. Silva. And right now I'm concerned about the gaps in your story. I'm concerned about a marriage that seems to have happened very quickly with no family present. I'm concerned about a lot of things. He turned to his computer again and started typing rapidly. Maya watched in horror as Chen's expression changed. His eyes narrowed. He leaned closer to the screen, reading something. Then he went completely still. When Chen looked up at Roberto, there was recognition in his eyes. And shock, Judge Silva Guerrero, Chen said slowly. You're Judge Roberto Silva Guerrero. Maya's world tilted. Judge Roberto was a judge? The man who cleaned floors at her office building had been a judge? Roberto closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, he looked exhausted. Former judge, he said quietly. Chen was staring at Roberto like he was seeing a ghost. I don't understand. You're a janitor. How is that possible? It's a long story, Roberto said. Then you better start telling it, Chen said, but his voice had changed. He didn't sound suspicious anymore. He sounded confused, stunned. Maya found her voice. Wait, someone please explain what's happening. Roberto, you were a judge? Roberto turned to her, and the look on his face broke her heart. It was shame and regret and sadness all mixed together. I'm sorry, he said. I should have told you. I wanted to, but I didn't know how. Officer Chen, Roberto said, turning back to the immigration officer. Before you make any decisions about Maya's case, you need to know something. This marriage isn't real. Maya didn't know who I was. I offered to help her because she was desperate, and I thought I could. But I shouldn't have lied to you. That's on me, not her. Roberto, stop, Maya said, panic rising in her chest. Don't say anything else, but Roberto kept talking. Maya Torres is a good person. One of the best I've ever met. She helps people who have nowhere else to turn. She deserves to stay in this country. What happens to me doesn't matter, but please don't punish her for my mistakes. Chen held up a hand. Both of you just stop for a minute. He rubbed his face with both hands, looking suddenly much older. Judge Silva Guerrero, I know who you are. I knew who you were. I worked as a clerk in the immigration courts 8 years ago. I was there during your last case. The Reyes family. Roberto nodded slowly. I remember. That case destroyed your career, Chen said quietly. Everyone said you were wrong to grant them asylum. They said you were too soft, too emotional, that you weren't following the law. I know what they said, Roberto replied. Chen looked down at his desk, at all the papers and files representing all the lives he held in his hands every day. When he looked up, his eyes were different, softer. The Reyes family is still alive, Chen said. They're in Oregon now. They have a small restaurant. Their kids are in college. If you had sent them back to Honduras, they would have been killed within a week. The gang that threatened them murdered 3 other people from their village that same year. Roberto's hands were shaking. I didn't know that, he whispered. You saved them, Chen said simply. And it cost you everything. The room fell silent. Maya felt like she couldn't breathe. She looked at Roberto and finally understood. He hadn't just had a bad career. He had sacrificed everything to save a family, and then he had hidden himself away, cleaning buildings invisible to the world, until he met her. Officer Chen closed Maya's file and pushed it to the side of his desk. He looked at Roberto for a long moment, then at Maya, then back at Roberto again. The silence in that small office felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. This interview is over, Chen finally said. I need time to process what just happened here. Maya, Roberto, you'll need to leave. I'll contact you both within 72 hours with my decision. Maya's voice came out shaky. What does that mean? Are you going to approve my renewal or not? Chen's expression was unreadable. It means I need to think. This situation is complicated, and I don't make complicated decisions in 15 minutes. You'll hear from me soon. Roberto stood up slowly. Officer Chen, whatever you decide about Maya's case, please remember that she had no idea who I was. She thought I was just a janitor trying to help. If there are consequences for fraud, they should fall on me. Roberto, stop talking, Maya said urgently, but he ignored her. I knew what I was doing, Roberto continued. I knew the risks. Maya was desperate, and I took advantage of that to ease my own conscience. She doesn't deserve to be punished for my choices. Chen stood up too. Judge Silva Guerrero, with all due respect, you need to stop confessing to crimes right now. Both of you, please leave. I'll be in touch. Maya grabbed Roberto's arm and pulled him toward the door. They walked out in silence, past the waiting room where other couples still sat nervously, down the elevator, through the lobby, and out into the bright sunshine that felt wrong somehow. The world should have been as dark as Maya felt inside. They walked 2 blocks without speaking. Finally, Maya stopped on the sidewalk and turned to face Roberto. People flowed around them, rushing to wherever they needed to be while Maya's entire life hung in the balance. A judge, she said, and her voice was tight with anger and confusion. You were a judge, and you didn't think that was important information to share with me? Maya. No, you let me think you were just some kind janitor who felt sorry for me. You let me believe you were risking nothing while I was risking everything. But you were risking your reputation, your whole identity. Why didn't you tell me? Roberto looked down at the sidewalk. Because if I told you who I was, you would have asked why I wasn't a judge anymore. And I wasn't ready to talk about that. I'm still not ready. Well, you're going to talk about it now, Maya said. Because Officer Chen knows who you are. And if I'm going down for fraud, I deserve to know the whole truth about the person who dragged me into this. You didn't get dragged, Roberto said quietly. You made a choice, based on lies. Maya's voice rose and several people glanced at them as they walked past. She lowered her voice, but the anger stayed hot in her chest. You lied to me, Roberto. About who you are. About what you were risking. About everything. I never lied, Roberto said. I just didn't tell you everything. There's a difference. That's a lawyer's argument, Maya shot back. Oh wait, you're not a lawyer. You're a judge. Or you were. I don't even know what to call you anymore. Roberto flinched like she had slapped him. They stood there on the sidewalk. Two people who had spent weeks building a fake marriage that somehow felt more real than Maya wanted to admit. And now it was all falling apart. There's a coffee shop around the corner, Roberto said finally. Can we please sit down and talk? I'll tell you everything. You deserve that. Maya wanted to say no. She wanted to walk away from Roberto and this whole mess, but she also needed answers. So she nodded, and they walked to the coffee shop in tense silence. It was one of those trendy places with exposed brick walls and expensive pastries under glass domes. Roberto ordered black coffee. Maya ordered tea she knew she wouldn't drink. They sat at a table in the back corner away from other customers. Start talking, Maya said. Roberto wrapped his hands around his coffee cup like he was cold, even though it was warm in the shop. I was an immigration judge for 12 years, he began. I heard hundreds of cases. Asylum applications, deportation hearings, all of it. And I tried to be fair. I really did. I followed the law. I made tough decisions. He paused and took a sip of his coffee. Maya waited, giving him time. Then 8 years ago, the Reyes family came before me. Roberto continued. David and Ana Reyes and their 3 children. They were from a small town in Honduras. David had witnessed a murder committed by a gang member. He reported it to the police and the gang threatened to kill his entire family if he testified. So they fled to the United States, Maya said, because she had heard stories like this 1,000 times in her own practice. Right. They applied for asylum, and on paper their case wasn't strong. The legal standard for asylum is very specific. You have to prove you're being persecuted based on race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. The Reyes family was being threatened because David witnessed a crime. That's not the same thing, legally speaking. Maya understood the problem immediately. Immigration law was full of these terrible gray areas where people in genuine danger didn't meet the technical requirements for protection. What did you do? She asked. I spent 3 weeks reviewing their case. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those 3 kids. The youngest was 6 years old. I did research. I looked at reports about the gang violence in their region. I consulted with experts, and I found a legal argument that could work. I ruled that they qualified for asylum as members of a particular social group or, specifically, family members of witnesses against gang violence. That's creative, Maya said, but not crazy. I've used similar arguments. The Department of Homeland Security didn't see it that way, Roberto said bitterly. They appealed my decision. They said I was being too lenient, setting a dangerous precedent. The case got media attention. Suddenly, I was the subject of news articles about soft judges letting everyone into the country. Politicians used me as an example of what was wrong with the immigration system. He stopped and rubbed his face with both hands. Maya could see how much this still hurt him even after all these years. My supervisor called me in, Roberto continued. He told me the department was under pressure. He strongly suggested I reverse my decision. He said if I didn't, there would be consequences. But you didn't reverse it, Maya said. No, because I had looked into Ana Reyes' eyes when she begged me to protect her children. I had watched David shake as he described the threats. I knew in my bones that if I sent them back, they would die. So I stood by my ruling. And they destroyed you for it, Maya said quietly. Roberto nodded. The Board of Immigration Appeals overturned my decision. But by then it didn't matter to my career. I was investigated for bias. They went through every case I had ever decided, looking for patterns of being too lenient. They didn't find anything criminal, but they found enough to question my judgment. I was asked to resign. If I didn't resign, they would fire me and I would lose my pension. So you resigned. I resigned, and then I couldn't find work. Other judges wouldn't hire me because I was controversial. Law firms didn't want someone with my reputation. I was toxic. Within 6 months, I lost my house. My ex-wife had already left me by then. She couldn't handle the stress and the media attention. I didn't blame her. Maya felt something shift inside her chest. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with sadness now. She had been so focused on her own problems that she hadn't really thought about what Roberto had lost. Why didn't you fight back? She asked. You could have gone to the media yourself, told your side of the story. I thought about it, Roberto said. But what was my side of the story? That I broke the rules to save people? That just proves their point that I couldn't be objective. And besides, fighting back would have just kept the attention on me. The Reyes family had gotten asylum through another route by then. I didn't want to do anything that might put a target on their backs again. So you just disappeared, Maya said. I just disappeared, Roberto agreed. I moved to a different part of the city. Started using my mother's maiden name, Silva, instead of Silva Guerrero. Got the janitor job because they didn't run a background check beyond criminal records, and I've been cleaning buildings ever since. Maya sat back in her chair trying to process everything. This man sitting across from her wearing his nice shirt and tie had been a judge. He had made decisions that affected people's lives. He had sacrificed his career to save a family, and then he had spent years invisible, mopping floors in the same building where she worked, where she walked past him without really seeing him. Why did you help me? Maya asked. Really? Was it just guilt over the Reyes family? Roberto looked at her and his eyes were honest. Partly, but also because I saw myself in you. Someone fighting a system that doesn't make sense. Someone who cares too much and works too hard and can't sleep at night because of all the people depending on them. I saw you in your office late at night, taking on cases you couldn't afford to take, and I thought maybe I could help. One person, one time. Maybe that would mean something. Maya felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You should have told me. I know. I'm sorry. If Chen reports us for fraud, I'll lose my law license. I'll go to prison. And I'll still get deported. I know, Roberto said again. That's why I confessed. If it comes to that, I'll take full responsibility. I'll say I tricked you, manipulated you. I'll make sure you're protected. That's not how the law works, Roberto. We're both guilty. They sat in silence for a while. The coffee shop filled with the afternoon crowd are people on laptops. Friends laughing together, a mother feeding a toddler. Normal life happening all around them while their world crumbled. Maya's phone buzzed. She looked down and saw Carmen's name on the screen. The text said, "How did it go?" Maya didn't know how to answer that question. How did you explain that your fake husband was actually a former judge who had sacrificed his career for justice? How did you explain that everything was both worse and more complicated than you ever imagined? What do we do now? Roberto asked. Maya put her phone away without answering Carmen. Now we wait for Chen to make his decision. And we hope that seeing your face reminded him why he became an immigration officer in the first place. We hope he remembers that laws are supposed to protect people, not just punish them. That's a lot of hoping, Roberto said. It's all we have. They left the coffee shop separately. Roberto went back to his apartment and Maya went home to her empty place where she had been preparing to lose everything. She looked at the photos they had taken together. At the beach, at the farmer's market, on her couch. They were supposed to be fake evidence of a fake marriage. But when she looked at them now, she saw something else. She saw two broken people who had found each other in the worst possible circumstances. She saw kindness and sacrifice. She saw what might have been in a different world where they had met under different circumstances. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Officer Chen sitting in his little office making a decision that would determine her entire future. She thought about Roberto alone in his apartment, probably not sleeping either, carrying the weight of his past and the burden of her present. Around 3 a.m, Maya got up and opened her laptop. She started searching for information about Judge Roberto Silva Guerrero. She found the news articles just like Roberto described, headlines about controversial asylum ruling,